Week 8 fantasy football is just so close. We are just one day away. And you know what we do every single Saturday? We go through every single matchup and we decipher who the must start and must sit wide receivers and running backs are. So right now we're going through those matchups, finding the must start and sit running backs in this video right now, guys. I'm filming this video at 6 in the morning on Saturday morning, guys. So please go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. It is greatly appreciated. So let's go ahead and just start diving through these matchups right now. So the first matchup of the weekend, we've got the Jets and the Giants. We've got the New York Bowl here. They're both playing in the same stadium. So it's not like anybody has a home field advantage, which of course is a big deal here. So you're going to start Breece Hall and Saquon Barkley. As you know, if you watch my running back ranking video for the week, Breece Hall was up there really high this week. I got so much confidence in Breece Hall this week. Breece Hall is such an efficient running back. He's averaging over 6 yards per carry. And now he's not sharing the backfield with Dalvin Cook anymore. That's a big deal because he's going to start taking all of that volume and he's playing a defense that is not good at all. So this is a matchup for success for Breece Hall right here. I absolutely love Breece Hall this week. I have full confidence telling my audience to roll Breece Hall out with full confidence this week. Saquon Barkley's also good as well. I mean, Saquon Barkley, as I've said a lot over the past couple weeks, he's the entire team's offense. That's ultimately what it comes down to with Saquon Barkley, is that he just doesn't have the ability to say, okay, I need a game from, this guy or this guy on my team, and the Giants can kind of lay off me this week. If he doesn't produce, this offense isn't producing. So that means that every single week in fantasy football, Saquon's going to be, at the very worst, a decent running back too. Saquon Barkley has always legitimate upside because he is simply just too important in this offense. Nobody's a flex option. As you know, they're both handling their backfield, and then everybody else is must sit. Dalvin Cook, if you still have Dalvin Cook on your team, I would advise you to cut him like today. He's got no value whatsoever. Jaguars and Steelers is the next matchup here. Of course, you start my guy Travis Etienne. I love Travis Etienne. He's been fantastic this year. On a per game basis, he is basically handling the same exact workload as Christian McCaffrey. He's been super important to this offense. It's been all Travis Etienne, and the dude's finding the end zone. Now, that's, of course, a very unpredictable stat week to week, right? So you can't always rely on touchdowns, but you can rely on the guy's workload, and it is Christian McCaffrey level every single week. Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris are still flexible. That's really the reality here, is that they're not going to be in must-start territory until I see a major shift, or until I see one of them just start to dominate week to week, which I don't know when that's going to happen, if ever. But I do prefer Jaylen Warren at this point. You can look back to last week. Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris both found the end zone. So they were both getting involved, but this is a different week here. They're playing a worse defense than they did last week. Last week, they played the Rams defense. They ran all over them. They did whatever they wanted to, basically, which is weird to say when you're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, but that's how it happened. I don't think that's going to happen against Jacksonville this week. I think they're going to struggle quite a bit. So Jaylen Warren, I prefer him because if they're handling basically the same workload here, Jaylen Warren's upside as a receiver is what separates him, because Najee Harris has not had much upside as a receiver this year. Jaylen Warren has. So that's why I will prefer Jaylen Warren over Najee Harris, because he does have that pass catching upside. And then everybody else is to sit. Tank Bigsby, I understand if you have him in Dynasty, but if you've got him in redraft leagues at this point, I don't know what you're holding on to him for. Like, he's got no value. I'm just joking. Tank Bigsby does have value as a handcuff running back. So if your bench is deep enough, I understand the reason why you have Tank Bigsby. Eagles at Commanders here. You start DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift every single week is going to be a must start. And really the reality here with DeAndre Swift is that he's obviously running behind one of the best offensive lines in football, right? So that's a huge advantage in his favor. And what I said before the season started was that I did not think that he was going to get a ton of pass catching upside. I was wrong. He's averaging over 4 targets per game. That's pretty good numbers right there for a running back. So I think that DeAndre Swift, just with the efficiency that he has behind that offensive line, with the pass catching upside, you can't sit him, especially in a matchup versus the Commanders. That is absolutely just a terrible defense right here. So I've got full confidence every single week in DeAndre Swift, especially this week. Brian Robinson Jr. is flexible. It's just been such a wild ride with Brian Robinson Jr. because honestly, I went from not liking him at all to saying, I think I was wrong about Brian Robinson. I think he's going to be a good fantasy running back this year, to now back to, I don't know why I changed my stance in the first place, because I think I was right. The guy is just simply not that efficient. He's averaging less than 4 yards per carry, and now he's averaging about 12 carries per game. And he's averaging like 3 targets per game. So like his workload is simply not there. And if you don't have a good workload and you don't have good efficiency, it's not a good combination here. And especially when you're playing the Eagles defense, that is number 1 in the league against stopping the run. It's not a good recipe here. Kenneth Gainwell, you sit him, you know, that there's just not much upside there week to week. And then Antonio Gibson, you do the same thing. Antonio Gibson is really, I still believe that he's dead weight on your roster if you're carrying him in a redraft league. Rams and Cowboys here is the next matchup. Tony Pollard, you fire him up, man. I'm big on Tony Pollard this week. He's coming off the bye week. He's got the good offensive line. They're getting a little bit healthier. And he's taking on the Rams defense at home. It's all a good matchup. It's a good recipe for success for Tony Pollard here. Have full confidence rolling out Tony Pollard. This Rams defense, this defensive line, this front seven, they're not going to be able to stop Tony Pollard for a full 60 minutes, guys. I expect Tony Pollard to get at least 20 opportunities in this game. He's going to be very, very good. Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman, I believe they're both flexible. When you look back to last week versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, Darrell Henderson was the guy. He handled 18 carries, and he did find the end zone. So Darrell Henderson actually had a good fantasy week. Obviously, he's on a lot more rosters this week than he was last week. So Darrell Henderson is flexible. Do not go out of your way to start him because he's playing the Cowboys defense. This is a defense, again, like I said, coming off the bye week at home. Against also a awful bottom 5 offensive line with the Los Angeles Rams. They're terrible offensive line. Awful. So there's a lot of problems here that could pop up. Now, of course, I understand you've got injuries, you've got bye weeks. You need to make some tough decisions here. I understand that right here. So if you must go with Darrell Henderson, he's not a bad option. He's more of in the middle tier just based on volume alone. Royce Freeman, though, is also flexible. Royce Freeman handled 12 carries last week against the Steelers and had 66 yards. He is a flexible option for sure. I would not say, again, I'm not going out of my way to play him. It's basically like having Gus Edwards on your roster, except Gus Edwards is playing a really bad matchup. That's what we're dealing with here with Royce Freeman specifically. So I would not go out of your way to do it. He's not as good of a flex option as Darrell Henderson. That's why he's below him in the rankings on this list right here. But he is flexible if you're in a pinch. Zach Evans, you sit him. He's got no upside at all. He's been overtaken by 2 guys that literally just joined the building a couple of days ago. So yeah, Zach Evans is a no-go. Everybody else is a no-go. Vikings at Packers here. I don't consider anybody a must-start in this matchup. Aaron Jones, the volume is not there. He's also not healthy right now. This team doesn't trust him with a workload because of his health. Alexander Mattison, workload's never there. This team is so allergic to having Alexander Mattison have at least 15 to 16 opportunities in a game. They just don't do that. They do not do that. A.J. Dillon, not a must start with Aaron Jones active. And Aaron Jones is active, so they're all in flex territory. And I would say that Alexander Mattison, Aaron Jones, and A.J. Dillon, none of them are any worse than like a middle tier flex option. They're not all bad options, right? Like Alexander Mattison does have receiving upside. He does see plenty of targets per game and plenty of opportunities per game when you combine the attempts and the receiving work. But he's not efficient on the ground. He hasn't scored a rushing touchdown all year. So if he doesn't get a receiving touchdown, he's not really going to have much upside for you. But I can understand the merit here because they're playing the Green Bay Packers defense, which is not only not good right now, but they're injured. They're injured and they're having a lot of issues. So I see the merit here in playing Alexander Mattison for sure. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, I see the same thing as well. Now, they've been better stopping the run than they have stopping the pass. So that's a problem here for Green Bay and their strengths as an offense. But Aaron Jones, as I said earlier, the dude's averaging like 10 opportunities per game when you combine rushing attempts per game and targets per game. This is a problem here. It's a problem. Unless he breaks off a big play, you're not getting much. Now, with that said, I would still prefer playing Aaron Jones over A.J. Dillon because A.J. Dillon, if he's handling 14 carries, 16 carries, he doesn't have the same upside that Aaron Jones does. So I'll take the upside play in Aaron Jones over a guy who I know is really never going to break off a big run because that's not his game. He's not an explosive running back. He's a big bruiser. And honestly, it's a compliment that he's even in flex territory because I really don't think he's even that great of a player. But with that said, he is a legit flex option this week. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to sit Cam Akers and you're going to sit Ty Chandler. Cam Akers just, I get it. He had some moments last week where people were like, oh, maybe there's Cam Akers. It's not, do not fall into this trap, guys. Do not start Cam Akers right now. And Ty Chandler didn't get a touch last week, so he's not even worth rostering in redraft leagues at this point. Falcons and Titans here. Bijan Robinson still must start, guys. You do not put Bijan Robinson on your bench. I've seen it. I've tried to look at a lot of different reports this week, and I'm still baffled by this whole Bijan situation in week 7. I still don't have an answer for what happened. I mean, obviously, he had headaches on Saturday night, and he woke up and the headaches weren't getting better, and they made the decision to sit him. They were getting investigated by the league. It's been a lot of weird stuff this week, and there really hasn't been much clarity. But all I know is that he practiced this week. So he's not looking like he's going to sit. So that's a good sign. And the reality here is, guys, Bijan Robinson, not only was he a first-round pick, and I'm not saying that you need to start him based on draft capital. I'm saying that you need to start him because the guy is efficient. He's averaging 5 yards per carry, and he's also averaging like 9 yards per reception. So this guy's efficiency is just through the roof. So if he gets the opportunities, which honestly, week to week, it's a little bit unpredictable. But if he gets at least 13 carries and at least 4 or 5 targets, I like the workload enough to put Bijan Robinson into must-start territory. Derrick Henry still must start as well. Like, Derrick Henry is not the player he used to be. He's not this running back 2, running back 1 option or top 5 running back in fantasy football, but he's still in the upper tier of running back 2 options. I've got him ranked as my running back 14 right now. So, like, he's still a good option. It's just a little bit disappointing, right? He's not the efficient guy he used to be. He's not the workload guy he used to be. But you're still going to play him against the Falcons defense for sure. Tyler Algier, Tyjae Spears as well. Tyler Algier, to me, like, you could play him for a long time because the thing with Tyler Algier is that Tyler Algier is handling the workload right now. He's handling basically as many carries per game as Bijan Robinson. The guy has been handling the workload. Just from a volume standpoint, he could be played. Tyjae Spears as well. I think this one you got to be a little bit more desperate because he's just not seeing as much volume. But this guy's handling, like, every single third down touch. Every single third down he's in. So Tyjae Spears does have merit here. I like the player. I think he's explosive. I just wouldn't say go out of your way to do it or play him over a guy like Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon. Everybody else is a must-sit. Patriots at Dolphins here. Raheem Mostert, I understand he started the week off. He was kind of, everybody was a little bit worried, right? Because he didn't practice. He practiced. He ended up the week not on the injury designation report. So Raheem Mostert is going to go. You don't have to worry about Raheem Mostert at all. He's ready to go against the Patriots. And the first time he played the Patriots this year, he absolutely crushed them. He had over 130 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. The guy was incredible. I'm playing Raheem Mostert with full confidence this week. Ramondre Stevenson and Jeff Wilson Jr. are flexible, though. Ramondre Stevenson, of course, is going to be flexible. I rarely will consider Ramondre Stevenson a must-start player just because of the offensive upside and his lack of efficiency. And he also shares the backfield with Zeke. So there's way too many parts here that put Ramondre into a territory where he's not a must-start player. Even in a matchup that, from a rushing perspective, Dolphins are susceptible, it's still not going to work because Ramondre and the Patriots, I do believe, are going to lose this game. Now, I actually think the Patriots will keep this one closer than a lot of people do. It's a division game. A lot of things happen in division games. But I will say that I just don't think that Ramondre's upside is ever going to be high enough week to week for me to be able to trust him enough to say to my audience, this guy's a must-start player. He's just not. The offense is way too bad. Jeff Wilson Jr., I get it. Like, honestly, I wrestled with this one for a little bit because the way, like, it went down last week. He got one touch. You know what I mean? So it's like, it was disappointing for sure, but what I was reading is that the guy was a full participant in practice all week. And also Mike McDaniel, the head coach, did say that he's going to get him more involved this week. So I think just from that standpoint, because of how great the offense's upside is, I think Jeff Wilson does have plenty of merit here as a flex option. But again, don't take this as like, go play this guy. He's a lower tier flex option. Zeke, I'm going to continue to sit. There's just not enough upside there in this offense, and he's just not that great of a player anymore. Saints at Colts. Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, you roll them both out. Alvin Kamara has been a fantasy stud this year, averaging 17 points per game in half PPR leagues. The dude is averaging 10 targets per game. It's unbelievable. 17 carries per game. This guy has been making the offense run. You do not sit Alvin Kamara ever. He's just too important to this offense. Jonathan Taylor, you fire him up, man. Jonathan Taylor looked very, very good last week, and it was his best game of the season. They're getting him more and more involved every single week, and he's looking great again. So the trajectory is just all climbing at this point for Jonathan Taylor. You got to take advantage of this matchup here. It's not a good matchup from a defensive perspective, but Jonathan Taylor, to me, is not going to go on my bench. And I'm not telling my audience to sit Jonathan Taylor because of the upside that he's bringing back to the table now that he's back. Zach Moss, I can't tell my audience to sit him. I think he's 100% flexible. And I would say he's a higher end flex option because, as I've said over this week, I said, Zach Moss is definitely not going to handle the ball as frequently as Jonathan Taylor will when they're comfortable to give Jonathan Taylor full realm. They made the investment on him. Follow the money. But Zach Moss has simply been too good for this team to be like, we're just going to put you back on the bench. Thank you for your service. Like, that's not going to happen. The guy's been way too good for them. So just from a efficiency standpoint, and also from the standpoint of they're not going to just put him on their bench. They're going to keep giving him volume. I think it's a very worthy play here. Everybody else is must sit. Saints running backs are totally irrelevant. Jamal Williams, don't play him. Texans at Panthers here. Nobody's must start. Both these running backs are just, they're not good enough. I need to see more from Dameon Pierce, who's at the top here. And I've discussed him as a ascending asset in recent weeks. I believe that. But when I say ascending asset, I'm not putting him in Derrick Henry territory or even Rashad White or Alexander Madison territory. Dameon Pierce, I still need to see more from for sure. I need to see a lot more from Dameon Pierce. Even though he's taking on the Panthers, and it should be a very, very good matchup where they get up a lot of points very early and he gets a lot of attempts, I do not feel comfortable telling my audience he's must start. Chuba Hubbard, I would start over Miles Sanders. I'm serious. Miles Sanders is back this week. But Miles Sanders has not been nearly as good as Chuba Hubbard has this year. So, in my thoughts, I think that they're actually going to give Chuba Hubbard plenty of volume. I would not be surprised to see him handle 12 to 15 opportunities in this game. Miles Sanders will see the majority of the carries in this game again, I think, because he has the big deal attached to him. They don't want to just put the guy on the bench. But Chuba Hubbard has been way better. He's looked way more explosive. He's been way more efficient. So I don't think they're just going to sit him down. That's just my opinion here. I don't really know if it matters that much because they're not going to do well against the Texans. But Chuba Hubbard, I do think, is a decent dark throw to take at the running back position. Devin Singletary, I'm sitting him. I'm not telling my audience to play him. Look, yeah, he was handling 13 carries before their bye week, but before that week, he handled 0 touches. So this guy is not taking. It's not the Devin Singletary takeover you've been hearing from other fantasy football YouTubers. It's just not. We need to see way more of it. Browns and Seahawks here is the next matchup, and here Kenneth Walker's always going to be a must start. The guy's healthy, you roll him out. The guy's just active, you roll him out. He's active this week. He missed practice a little bit earlier this week, but he's walking into the weekend without an injury designation. You play for sure Kenneth Walker. I don't care what the matchup is. You play him. He's been way too good for any kind of sit in fantasy football. Kareem Hunt is flexible, and honestly, here's the deal. He would have been in must-start territory had he not had a week of practice where he missed some time. So he's not 100%. He's got a thigh injury. It bothered him. But he's going. He's going and he's handling the workload because Pierre Strong in sit category, he's not worth it. Do not play Pierre Strong. Kareem Hunt's going to get plenty of work here. I just would not tell my audience, go out of your way and start him over a guy like Jonathan Taylor or start him over a guy like Derrick Henry. I don't believe that far. Kareem Hunt is a upper tier flex option that was flirting with being a must start, but just because of the injury, I do not have him as a complete must start. Zach Charbonnet is flexible this week with a Kenneth Walker that had an injury concern earlier in the week. I do think Zach Charbonnet has some merit here as a lower tier flex option that you want to take a shot on if you're just decimated with injuries and bye weeks here. Bengals at 49ers, the next matchup here. Christian McCaffrey, you roll him out. Let's not even address it. You just play the guy. Joe Mixon, I still think is a must-start guy. I do consider a must-start because Joe Mixon is going to get the volume. And even though the 49ers are a very, very stout run defense, I think this Bengals team is about to get it going. And as we see every single year with the Bengals at this time of the year where they pick it up, Joe Mixon becomes more valuable because he is reliant at this point on a very good passing offense. So if Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and even T. Higgins can get it going, Joe Mixon's going to have more upside because there's going to be more balance that they could force the defense on their toes for. So I never think that Joe Mixon's a very good play, like especially against this 49ers team, but I'm not putting Joe Mixon on my bench, and I'm not telling my audience to put Joe Mixon on the bench. Nobody's flexible. Everybody handles the backfield here between Christian McCaffrey and Joe Mixon. Nobody's flexible. You sit all of them else. Chiefs at Broncos here. Isaiah Pacheco's must start, baby. This guy has been very good in fantasy. He's now really their second best weapon on this offense. It goes Travis Kelce and it goes Isaiah Pacheco. That's the reality here. You play him against this awful they're awful defense, but they're an awful run defense specifically. They gave up so much. They're dead last in the league at defending the run. So it's a no-brainer start here with Isaiah Pacheco. Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, they're flexible. I would say they're both middle tier, and maybe you could argue that Javonte is a little bit upper tier. I'm not telling my audience to play either one of them. I'm saying that Javonte Williams handled the majority last week, but the week prior he didn't. So it's like, it's always going to be different. Jaleel McLaughlin is on here simply because he's actually efficient. He's actually been really efficient with the touches he gets. It's just a growth situation in Denver. So Samaje Perine, Jerick McKinnon, you sit both of them. My hopes for Jerick McKinnon this year have not come to fruition yet, but it can happen any week. So just continue to keep an eye on what Jerick McKinnon can do for your team. Ravens and Cardinals here. Nobody's must start. Nobody at all is must start. I don't trust either running back on either team. Gus Edwards, Amari DiMercato, they're both flexible. I would prefer Gus Edwards because we've seen more consistency with his workload at this point of the season. Amari DiMercato handled the majority last week, but the week prior, he had 2 touches. It's never going to be consistent for Amari DiMercato. I think he's going to come in as the top dog, but do not go out of your way to play Amari DiMercato. Justice Hill, Keontae Ingram, no. Just don't do it. Justice Hill didn't handle but a couple touches in their blowout win versus the Lions. And Keontae Ingram, the touches weren't there for him either last week. So no go for both those guys. Bears at Chargers, the Sunday night game. Austin Eckler, fire him up. Fire him up. I get it. The Bears defense is actually a better run defense than they are pass defense. So people might be looking at this and saying, Austin Eckler may not have as good of a week as you think. Well, if he gets 5 targets, if he gets 8 targets in this game, he's going to be great. I think this is a major bounce back game calling for Austin Eckler. I've got a lot of confidence in him. Do not sit Austin Eckler. Do not do it. Deonta Foreman, Roschon Johnson. Roschon's return totally muddies what I was going to have as a good week for Deonta Foreman. Deonta Foreman is just not in a situation where I can trust him. I can't trust the workload here. It's not that I can't trust what he did last week, but I can't trust telling my audience that his workload is going to be stable. Roschon Johnson is definitely going to make things muddy, but I do think that he does still have upside because I do think that after last week's performance, he will still be involved to a point this week. Roschon Johnson may get the pass catching upside, but Deonta Foreman, I could definitely still see him being involved. So I would put Deonta Foreman slightly above Roschon Johnson as a flexible option in the middle tier, but they're both very, very close to me. Joshua Kelly, you go ahead, sit him. Austin Eckler, there's no business playing Joshua Kelly. Raiders at Lions, the Monday night game. You play Jahmyr Gibbs, you play Josh Jacobs. Jahmyr Gibbs does have upside in this matchup. Obviously, last week he had his best fantasy performance all season. Finally found the end zone. We were throwing parties over here for him. It was fantastic. You play him again this week because he's playing the Raiders. And they're going to crush the Raiders at home on Monday night. They're crushing the Raiders, and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get plenty of workload. We might have a party in the second week for Jahmyr Gibbs. So there might be some Jahmyr Gibbs parties. It's going to be awesome. Josh Jacobs here, you play him still. I get it. Like, not only is the matchup not good, but he has not been good. Josh Jacobs does handle all the workload out of his backfield, though. So just from a volume basis, Josh Jacobs is still a good starting option at running back. You probably don't have too many options that you're going to start over him. Flex territory, nobody's in flex territory here. You're going to sit Dave Montgomery, and the reason he's got stars behind his name is because it's a Monday game. I'm filming this at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. Last thing I heard is that he hasn't practiced yet this week. So he hasn't been officially ruled out, but I'm pretty sure he will be. So that's why he's in sit territory. Of course, if he plays, you definitely play him. But it doesn't look like he's going to go. And if he doesn't go, Craig Reynolds is not anything worth it. He just doesn't see the volume. So let me know what questions you need answered before Week 8 Fantasy Football. And if you want to see exactly how these running backs ranked in Week 8 Fantasy Football, click on this video to see my top 30 running back rankings for Week 8.